Hello and a very warm welcome to the Sacred Womb podcast, where we talk about all things to do with befriending our menstrual cycle, deeply healing both our feminine and masculine aspects, and how we can indeed utilise our cyclical nature as a natural spiritual pathway that's encoded within our bodies. I'm your host, Melanie Swan, and you can also go to thesacredwomb.com for more information and loads of fantastic free resources. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Sacred Womb podcast. We're on episode 43, and today we have Holly Grigg-Spall, author of Sweetening the Pill. But before we get started with Holly, I wanted to ask you how you're doing. How's your womb feeling? How's your general well-being in these current times? Women are speaking up. We are rising. We are coming back to ourselves, our bodies, our power, our voice. And they're powerful, powerful times. And that can be triggering for us, it can be empowering for us, it can be all and everything. So wondering how you are, the Sacred Womb private Facebook group is there if you want to connect, if you want to talk to me, if you want to talk to 1,000 other women actually are in there now who are all into this womby sort of stuff, who are open to their cycles. So do come and join us if you haven't already. Few things happening at the Sacred Womb at the moment. So there's a new shop on the Sacred Womb website with a great practice to clear your womb space of past lovers. I've made the practices on there nice and affordable so that you can access them and really start to heal your womb space. It's very important to clear energy of past lovers. There's a daily practice on there, and there'll be some workshops coming soon and more as well. So watch that space. The link's in the show notes if you want to take a look at that. Also, very quickly, the Moon Medicine Woman training starting October 2018 is now open for registration. So please go over and check that out. See if it's for you. I'm looking for 16 dynamic women to come and do some juicy womb work and train to do this stuff professionally. So head on over to theonlinemoonlodge.com. There's a drum journey on there with Wolf so that you can get to have a feel for if that's the right thing, the right path for you to take. Links are in the show notes again, and I look forward to hearing from you if that's your sort of thing. Very, very cool things happening, and my year has started with my cycle, not with the new year, but it started with my new cycle. So wonder if anyone else felt like that. So anyway, in summary, powerful times for us. What an awesome time to be alive as we really reclaim our bodies, our boundaries, our voice, and our place in the world, really. Anyhow, so let's introduce you to Holly Grigg-Spall. Holly is the author of Sweetening the Pill, as I said, or How We Got Hooked on Hormonal Birth Control. She's consulting producer on a documentary inspired by her book, directed by Ebby Epstein and executive produced by Ricky Lake. So Holly is also currently an ambassador for the Daisy Fertility Tracker and a marketing consultant for several women's health-centric companies. So Holly's here today to talk to us all about her book, how she got the inspiration for it, what drove her, what was behind it, and what she found out along the way. So she's going to share all that with us. So without further ado, here is Holly. Okay, so thanks for joining us, Holly. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. What came to you that made you think, I'm going to write a book about the pill?
Well, it was a sort of meandering process, really. I was a journalist, but I was a film journalist, so I would write film reviews and do interviews and things like that. So I always had that curiosity to write about things, and especially to research topics that I came across that interested me. And with the pill, I had a specific experience with Yasmin, which was a very popular brand of pill at the time. And I wanted to sort of branch out as a journalist and maybe write an article about it. And so that's how it started, where I just was researching for one specific article. I did a few interviews, and then it rolled into a blog. And I can't say that when it began as a blog that I really thought, oh, this will be a book. You know, I had a family friend actually who's quite in the, you know, embedded in the UK publishing world, and she sort of said, well, no, this isn't an article, this isn't a book. And of course now it's a book and a documentary, so I proved her wrong. And so I did start out that way. I started out with an article and then a blog, and then I would pitch, and I wrote some articles for newspapers and magazines about the topic, and it sort of, as I say, meanderingly progressed from there. It was a tough book to get published. I'm not a doctor, I'm not from even a science writer or a science journalism background. So pitching a book to agents and publishers about the pill that looked at side effects, the medical side and the sort of sociological, historical side, with no kind of academic or otherwise foundation for that, was tricky. Yeah. But I did have some encouragements from some key people that I did reach out to, one agent in particular who said, like, this is going to be really important. I just can't take it on myself, usually was what would happen. But I kept pushing in my spare time, really, while I was doing other things, and eventually found it a home.
Yeah. And you said this, that you had your own experience with the pill, and you were on something called Yasmin, did you say? Yasmin,
yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, can you tell us a bit more about that, like how long you were on it and the side effects and what you experienced?
Yeah, so that really, it begins my book, and was really the through line of the blog too, because I'd been on the pill for some time at that point, since I was 17. I suppose it was then 8 years. And I was offered this pill as an alternative that would have less side effects than the ones I'd been on before. And a lot of people I knew were using it, including my sister, and my friends, and my very, very good friend had been on it and come off it. And that was a key part of what my story, actually what became my story for the blog and the book, because I had really bad side effects on Yasmin over about the course of 2.5 years, physical and psychological. I just felt very, very unwell, and I was, suffering with really bad depression and anxiety, but I also had a lot of physical issues like constant, really awful UTIs and getting sick all the time and fatigue. And, I did end up talking to my friend about it, and she said, she had some similar issues and she decided to come off it. And that was sort of a key moment for me where I realised and put two and two together and was able to start doing the research that I mentioned earlier, and for myself. And as most people know, if you go back to your doctor and say, well, this pill is causing me side effects, they're not going to discuss why or how. They're just going to offer you another kind of pill or a different kind of hormonal contraceptive. So I went away and did a lot of research for myself, and started making connections about why this particular pill would have caused such severe issues for me, and as I soon found out, lots of other women, and then more widely, like what the pill was doing to women in general. So it went from a very specific thing where I thought, well, Yasmin must be the culprit, Yasmin is a problem, this brand of pill is doing something, to realizing that, the pill in general had some pretty powerful effects that perhaps ranged from person to person, but were worth looking into too. So that's kind of where it came out of. It was really a series of connecting the dots.
And what did you connect up? Like, why was it Yasmin for you that was causing so many troubles? Apart from it being just cutting you off from your cycle and just being a pill, yeah.
Well, it was a new progestin that they used, and they do that often because it gives them a new opportunity to, the pharmaceutical industry, it gives them a new opportunity to patent the drug. So they developed a pill with a new level of progestin and a new type of progestin, which was drospirenone. And now, of course, Yasmin isn't patent anymore. So any pill with drospirenone in it, and there are plenty of them, will have a similar or the same effect for some people. And so when I was looking into it, it was interesting to me because it had a specific impact on mineral balance, potassium, and it had a specific effect on testosterone. And it's debatable. I mean, I know some people think it's to do with how low the progestin is, that the estrogen actually has a more dominant effect. Other people think it's the progestin being more dominant over the estrogen. But basically, it was a new progestin, the makeup of it, the way that it was reacting to changing your mineral balance, which had a lot of effects, including some that ended up coming out and was caused quite a lot of controversy because it was causing some really serious physical issues that they weren't disclosing. Also happens to have mental health effects. But also I think it was to do with the fact that I'd been on it for, as I said, 8, then 9, 10 years at that point. And, over that time, the pill has got insidious side effects. So that includes sort of vitamin deficiency issues. And so, when you're in your 20s and you've got 8 years of declining vitamin levels and ability to absorb vitamins, then, if you're not eating super, super healthily, that's going to have quite a dramatic effect on you. And I think, over time as well, the effect on my mood, when I started looking back, I could see sort of peaks and troughs and things that had occurred over time with other brands of pill from when I was in high school and college onwards. So that what seemed very extreme with Yasmin, actually, when I look back, I had some pretty extreme, especially mental health side effects with other brands of pill that I just at the time didn't connect. Didn't make, now when I look back, it's quite obvious to me that was what was going on. Wow.
That sounds quite a lot to deal with, actually.
It was a real personality change, and it was very frightening, and it really felt sort of like I had something, very much permanently wrong with me, and that I wasn't able to have any control over. It was very frightening. And a study just came out last week or a couple of weeks ago that connected hormonal contraceptives and suicide risk. And it's something that I talked about in the book, which is that, I would get very depressed and very anxious, and you'd get very, very dark and have very low self-esteem and wake up every morning with this sort of real sense of sort of negativity and dread, really. And that was actually what I ended up being able to connect between me and other women who were experiencing the same thing, specifically because they had this very strange sense of like something terrible was going to happen to somebody that they loved, or a family member or themselves, and they had that all the time every day. And I was like, that's weird, I feel like that too. And that was so specific that I was like, there has to be something to this.
Wow, that's intense. Okay. How long did it take once you'd stopped taking the pill for those sorts of symptoms to clear up?
Well, I shifted from Yasmin to another brand called Femidet because I really, having been on it since I was 17, was very uncomfortable with the idea of coming off the pill to begin with. Not particularly for contraceptive reasons, because I was worried about getting pregnant at first, but more because I didn't know what my cycle would look like or what it would feel like. When I was a teenager, my periods were really heavy and painful, and that's all I had memory of. So I assumed when I came off that it would be like that again.
Okay.
And that really worried me. So I went from Yasmin to Femidet, but then when I finally got comfortable with the idea of coming off and really just got to the point of saturation, I knew that switching to Femidet had made me feel somewhat better, but not a lot better. And I still had lingering issues from the Yasmin and the build-up of the side effects. And so I said, well, I think the only way for me to know what's really going on here is just to come off completely. And then I think it was probably 3 to 6 months before I would say I came through what I call the sort of withdrawal period, but then I still had some really bad acne problems for maybe 2 years after coming off the pill.
Did your doctor tell you about any of these side effects when you started the pill?
No, I never had a doctor tell me anything from the start at all. The only time that I actually ended up having a discussion about side effects was when I went to my doctor and said, look, I've been on Yasmin for 2.5 years and it was actually worse than all the other pills I'd been on, even though I was told it was supposedly like a new, a great new option, improved, advanced. And I told her, I've had these mental health side effects. And then my doctor said, oh, that's interesting. She said, I came off the pill quite recently, even though she was in her early 40s. And she said, I always thought I was a really down and depressive person. And then I came off and I was like, oh, actually, I'm a really easygoing, happy-go-lucky person. So she had gone through that experience herself. But, she had done that quite recently. And so when I went back, the only thing that I understood to ask for and the only thing she knew to give me was just a different kind of pill. There was no discussion of like, well, maybe you don't need to be on the pill any longer. Maybe, you can take a break. It was just, well, that one was a problem. Let's try another one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, why do you think it is, Holly, that we're so, as a culture, so willing to prescribe this and so willing to take it?
I think it's very deeply embedded with how we feel about periods, and that's all wrapped up with how we feel about women's bodies. I think, we have a lot of myths and misinformation around periods and cycles and fertility for women, from the fact that young girls are definitely taught and go into adulthood thinking that they can get pregnant really easily any day. Just somebody, a boy looks at you in a certain way and you get pregnant.
Yeah.
Or you get pregnant in a hot tub, or you get pregnant in a swimming pool, yeah. Or all these things. So we're kind of trained to be very scared of our fertility, but we're also, when you get your period, you're not meant to feel good about that. That it's not meant to be something that you would ever have any positive feelings about, or let alone neutral feelings about. And so the idea that that's the sort of problem with women's bodies, I think, and that it inherently needs fixing, that it's not like because it's different from the male body, because it's what only women experience. It's a problem that needs to have a medication, that needs to be fixed for you to sort of lead a normal life, basically a productive life. Then I think those two things are very powerful. And I think aside from that, we very much believe that the pill is safe. The idea that, well, there's nothing to be worried about taking it because women have taken it for many, many years. The way we talk about it, like the hormones in the pill are the same as the hormones in your body, it's not true. The pill is regulating your cycle, it's not true. You're still having periods on the pill, it's not true. There's a lot of those sort of half-truths embedded in how we even talk about it. So I think it's very easy to start taking it, and I think it's very easy to keep taking it and not question it. And also, which is one of the main points of my book, not make the connection between how you feel physically or mentally and the pill that you're taking. I think it's with most other medications, if you were taking something every day and you had change in your mental health or a change in your physical health, you might go to your doctor and say, I think it's probably this medication you've been giving me to take every day. Yeah. But with the pill, we don't do that. We don't see it, partly because I don't think we really see it as a medication. And so we just think it sort of is a supplement almost and harmless. And so I think that means a lot of women suffer side effects for a very long time without ever realising that there's an option for them not to feel the way they do.
Yeah, or maybe being told or thinking that they should get therapy, or there's something wrong with us, or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. It's intense, isn't it? I mean, because originally we had it in, what was it, the 60s to sort of liberate us from getting pregnant. So I think that was the intention with the pill, that I understand it. But uncannily, it's done the very opposite.
Yeah, and actually I think for a certain group of people that is a very pervasive and powerful belief too, which means you go on the pill or you stay on the pill. Like, I think my mother, who was in her 20s in the 1960s, really felt that, and still does, and has a very kind of an attitude that's very much like not having a period is liberating, not breastfeeding is liberating, not experiencing pain in childbirth, or having, being able to have everything that a hospital can give you is very liberating. And so she, obviously, me being 16, 17, was a big part of how I ended up on the pill. And I also think that, a lot of young women too really think it's sort of a feminist action almost to take the pill, especially in the US, where it's still controversial to access the pill, to take the pill. They have this very underlying puritanical culture, puritanical side of it, the religious side of it, where, sex, their reaction is still very much embedded in trying to make sex be a normal part of life, whereas I think in a lot of European countries we kind of got past that point, where we can have a more nuanced discussion. But a lot of people in the US are still at the point of reacting to their school or parent or whoever it was that was telling them that sex was wrong and dirty and only for marriage, and really just that was how it was presented to them. So I think the pill then, if you are growing up in that environment, would seem like a really rebellious thing to take. I'm going to take this and I can have sex whenever I want. And it's, I think when I was a teenager, the pill did represent womanhood, and it did represent like having sex, even though I wasn't having sex. I didn't have sex for a few years after I went on the pill. It still was like the next best thing.
Yeah.
So I think, in a way that sort of anti-sex culture, especially that you get in the US, is kind of like that taking the pill is seen as sort of that, and also taking control, I think.
Yeah.
And that's seen as a very empowering decision to do something, especially if your parents don't know. If your friends are doing it, it's an independence thing. It's very much wrapped up in all that, including, the feminist history of the way, places like Planned Parenthood and people, feminist leaders and media representatives of the movement still talk about it, is very much like this was a victory for us.
Yeah.
And we should be grateful for it.
Wow. This is really cool to hear this, Holly, because that's exactly why I went on the pill at 16. I went on the pill. I took myself to the doctors as soon after my 16th birthday as I possibly could. My parents didn't know. I saw it very much as I am doing what I want. And I put myself on the pill. And, I still remember, the doctor didn't tell me there would be any side effects or any risks.
Right.
It just talked about AIDS, actually, and that it wasn't so prevalent in Stoke-on-Trent, and so condoms weren't that necessary.
Oh, interesting. Very location-specific advice.
I know. It's like, thanks. Actually, I think a condom would have been better. But yeah, it was certainly an act of sort of taking control and of rebellion and of, I'm 16 now. But yeah, that's really cool to hear that. I'm kind of smiling as I hear you thinking, oh yeah, okay, that's why I did it.
Well, also I think for young women as well, it's about, if you're on the pill, then you're broadcasting to boys, I'm thinking about sex, I'm ready for sex,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of what young girls do is a reaction to that culture of, obviously trying to have a boyfriend, trying to lose your virginity, etc. And, I think that's, we can't forget that that's a part of it too. And there's a certain amount of coercive culture and pressure there that young girls be protect themselves and be protected by parents making that decision, or protect themselves and be available, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So the pill affects our hormones. It's not real hormones. There's lots of myths about it. Yeah. What would someone do if they're listening to this and they're on the pill? Like, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think it's, usually when women hear about possible side effects, so especially when it's things like depression and anxiety, a lot of women do have a sort of instinctive feeling like maybe the pill is either causing this or making it worse for me. And usually the advice is then go to your doctor, talk to them about it, see what they suggest. But the issue is that most doctors, whether you're in the US or the UK or anywhere, will usually say it's not the pill, or it's not your hormonal IUD or your implant or your ring or whatever it is you're using, and will make you doubt yourself and will maybe ask you to stay on for longer or switch to something different but still synthetic hormone based. So I actually always just say that's the advice you're going to get, but I would just suggest to, responsibly for yourself, come off without consulting your doctor if you can, because, that's your right, especially if you're on the pill. If you're on the implant or the hormonal IUD, it's trickier. You need someone to remove them. So I always say if you feel so low or you have such terrible side effects right now that you feel you can't really cope with that appointment yourself, you should take a friend with you who can be an advocate for you. And so, if you really need somebody to help you say, like, I don't want this anymore. And then to take a break. There's no harm in taking a break. Obviously, protect yourself from pregnancy during that time with condoms. And I always say condoms and a separate spermicide like Contragel, which you can buy online, is really, really effective. And just do that until you're ready to decide whether you really think, well, yeah, that's what was happening. It was causing these side effects or making these issues for me worse. And, you need to give it 3 to 6 months. And during that time, maybe consider reading a book about your body so you can learn more about your cycle and fertility awareness. There's a book that everybody will recommend, which is Taking Charge of Your Fertility, but I actually think it can be quite intimidating. Mm-hmm. I would say you could even start with her book that she wrote for teenagers, which is Cycle Savvy. Tony Weschler's Cycle Savvy. It's very, very basic, but it really that information really helped me feel confident to come off the pill and to feel confident to prevent pregnancy without hormonal contraceptives, and really changed my relationship to my period, and I think changed how I experienced my cycle to the point that, I said before I was really worried I'd come off and I would have really heavy and painful periods again, and that's just not been my experience at all. And I think that's partly because of the different lifestyle I lead and the food I eat and my stress levels perhaps, but also I think it's because I just learned more and developed a different relationship with my period and came to understand it as holistically and as something that I can impact in how I behave and what I do.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thanks, Holly. Before we close, is there anything you would like to add?
Oh, well, as I mentioned, it is good to flag this up because I do want people to be aware of it. But as I mentioned very, very early on, my book is in the process of becoming a feature documentary, and it's in production right now. But in 2018, it should be coming out and released, fingers crossed. And, we had a really great grassroots campaign that raised the money to actually make this film after we weren't able to get the money from the normal avenues. And so when it does come out, it will really need the support of the same kind of grassroots support of screenings and people talking about it and word of mouth. So it's good for women to be aware that it is coming. If you've heard about it, not to think it's already on Netflix. It's still on the way.
Okay. So. Is that where it's going? Is it going on Netflix?
Oh, I hope so. I really don't know at this point. Yeah. I'm sure streaming platform will be the final destination point. So, yeah.
That sounds amazing. And Ricki Lake, has she produced it?
Yes, she is executive producing it. It's a team who made The Business of Being Born, which is quite a well-known documentary. So she executive produced it, and the same director of The Business of Being Born is directing this one.
Okay. And when roughly in 2018 is it due?
I think it will be September, October.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So for everyone listening, I will send out that information once it's released, and I hope you can arrange some sort of screening or something for all the women in your life when it comes out.
Yes, and I think that would be great, because I always say, you know, a book is a book, but a documentary is such a powerful medium. And, you know, I've watched hour-and-a-half long documentaries and completely changed my entire life for the sake of the fact that it was such a good message that was conveyed. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to it being out.
I'm looking forward to seeing it, bringing it to life. It's great. Thanks, Holly. So what we're going to talk about in the next podcast is Daisy, which is like, you know, we don't want to be on the pill anymore generally, but what do we do? What is a very reliable, natural alternative? So we're going to talk about that on the next podcast. Thank you so much, Holly, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Bye. Great advice from Holly there. So also, if you are thinking of coming off the pill or you're in the process of it, Holly has set up a private Facebook group that you can go into and get support. It's called Unsweetening the Pill. That link is in the show notes. So yeah, that resource is there for you if you wish. I hope you enjoyed that podcast. I certainly did. You can also pick up Holly's book, Sweetening the Pill. There's a picture of it in the show notes again. And, I really recommend you do that. I think it's great that whether we're on or off the pill, that we're really informed about the history of our bodies and what happened and where we've come from. You know, it can really help us move forwards and not make maybe the same mistakes again, and also become empowered and spread information and talk to each other. It's one of our gifts. We talk to each other and we spread the word. So ladies, we'll be back next time, episode 44. We'll be talking to Holly again about Daisy, the fertility computer. I'm using it myself now, so I'll also be able to update you on a separate podcast and do a proper review on that. But Holly's going to tell us how it works, how it was created, how it's different from other fertility trackers and apps. So yeah, looking forward to that one. Until then, I will see you next time. I really hope you enjoyed the podcast and that you got some useful tips out of it that can make a genuine difference in your daily life. And if you'd love to work deeper with this stuff, then do head on over to thesacredwomb.com, where you can sign up to receive the weekly newsletter and an invite to our private Facebook group, where you can share, learn and grow with like-minded women in a safe, supported space. Thank you so much for tuning in. Do leave us a rating, and your comments are very, very welcome. And I'll see you next time.